Hi everyone. Here's the lesson that I did on Tuesday that I was unable to post. Okay. So for the 20s, this is going to be an introduction. For the 30s, this is going to be a very good review. Okay. So we're starting to talk about another past tense that we call the imperfect. Now, when I teach them, I often refer to the preterite as the red verb and the imperfect as the green verb tense. And the reason being is when we talk about the preterite, we're talking about more um, ended, things that stop, events that have come to an end. When we talk about the imperfect, we're talking about things that were ongoing in the past, things that happened like that happened many, many times. And so the green just is to help you remember that that is the ongoing type of verb tense. Now, just like estar and ser, where we have two verbs in Spanish which mean the exact same thing in English, but we need to know the context and how we're using the verb before we can choose which verb to use. The preterite and the imperfect work kind of under the same in the same way, where you need to know what it is that you are trying to say before you can figure out which verb tense you're going to use. Okay, so I'm just going to run through them fairly quickly, and then maybe I'll do a couple of examples. Okay, so when we talk about the preterite, we're talking about single specific events in time. Okay, so I was born in 2001. It's a single event, it's specific, open-ended. Okay, I went to bed, something that I did, single event, very specific. Okay, the beginning of a past action or emotion. So anytime you're talking about the beginning of an action, you are always going to use the preterite. When you're talking about the end of an action, you're also going to use the preterite. Same with an emotion. You can say, when it started to rain, there's your start. Um, I got very scared. That is the beginning of your emotion, so you're going to use the preterite. If you know how long the action went on for, you are always going to use the preterite. So the minute you put a time frame in a sentence, you are always going to use the preterite. So for example, if I said, I studied last night, that's a single event. If I said I studied for 2 hours, because I have a specific time, it is going to be preterite. And it doesn't matter how long the time frame is, but the minute there is a time frame, you are going to use the preterite. So I could say, I played soccer for 20 years, right? 20 years is a very long time, but again, I am putting a specific time frame, and so the preterite is going to be used. Okay, a completed action. Okay, I drove to Edmonton yesterday. I watched Netflix. Um, right? That's it's kind of like the beginning. It's also the end. Okay. Sequence of events. If you're talking about certain things that happen and you're talking about the sequence of them, because you're starting a new action, and each time you give an action or that you're giving a new verb, it's the beginning of that action. Therefore, it is considered to be preterite. So I got up, preterite. I brushed my teeth, completed. I left the house. So these are single events that I know the beginning. I'm telling you about the beginning of them, and obviously they're completed. Okay. The last way that we use the preterite is when we are talking about an interruption. So something could have been going on in the past, but the minute I say, well, this happened, it's interrupting something else that was going on. That is your preterite. So the example here, I was reading, that is something that was going on when the phone rang, and there's my interruption. Okay. When we go to the imperfect, okay, we're talking about actions in progress in the past. Okay, so what was happening at a certain point in time? So it could have been the weather. It was raining when the car ran into the tree. Okay, so that weather, it was raining. It was an action that was in progress, something that was going on. While I was watching TV, um, my dog barked. Okay, so there, the watching TV is your continuous, there's your imperfect, and then the dog barked could be considered an interruption, and then we would go into the preterite. Okay. When we talk about habitual or repeated past actions, so typically the I used to, we would use the imperfect. However, the problem with this part is that in English, a lot of the times we don't say I used to. We just say the action that we did. So for example, I could say when I was young, I used to watch cartoons every Saturday morning. Okay. So that is um, a habitual action. But I can also say in English, yeah, I watched cartoons when I was a kid. And so I've taken out the used to, but I am still talking about a habitual or a repeated past action. So we're going to use the imperfect. When we're talking about descriptions of emotions, state of mind, characteristics, when we're talking about the setting of something, the circumstances, the physical attributes, we are always going to use the imperfect. So I could say, when I was young, I had long hair. That is a description. That is going to be in the imperfect. Okay. I was very sad yesterday. Emotion. It's a description of emotion, so I am going to use the imperfect. When I talk about age in the past, always in the imperfect. If I'm talking about time in the past, again, I am going to be using imperfect. And when I'm talking about an anticipated or a planned past action, I am going to use the imperfect. So we were going to call, but my phone broke. I was going to do my homework, but I forgot my textbook at school. Okay, so it was an anticipated, it was a planned past action. Okay, so to recap, if you're retelling a story, okay, when you're retelling that story, the imperfect is often used for the background information. So if I was telling a fairy tale, I would start once upon a time, there was a young girl who lived with her mom. Background information ongoing. She wore a red cape, was young, and was very naive. Okay, so all of those is my background information. I'm giving you the setting, I'm describing the character, all of that imperfect. If I am now talking about the events that happened, the main events that happened in that story, I am going to use the preterite. So in my story, well, there was a young girl who wore a red cape. One day she went into the forest and met a wolf. That went into the forest and met a wolf. That would be in your preterite because those are your main events. Those are actions that have happened. Okay. Typically, what gets students really confused is that they tend to they tend to think that you can only use the imperfect or the preterite. However, you can use both of them in the same sentence, just like you can use ser and a star in the same sentence. Okay, so I could say um, it was it was raining imperfect when I was born, preterite. When I was 10, imperfect. I broke my arm. A completed action, a single event. So you can use both of them in the same sentence. Okay. So a couple of words that will trigger whether you're going to use imperfect or preterite. Typically, if we use the word mientras, which means while, um, it's going to be followed by the imperfect. So while I was sleeping, the burglar um, broke into my garage. Okay. Um, while I was watching TV, the power went out. Okay. Same with de repente, which means suddenly. So this is the beginning of something. This is an interruption. While I was watching TV, all of a sudden or suddenly, the power went out, and that would be your preterite. Okay. So I've got a few examples here we went over with the class. I'll leave them to you. We can go over them tomorrow. And also, I have a movie. I've described a movie, and in the movie, I have put preterite and imperfect verb tenses, and you just have to figure out why they're being used, what verb tense is being used, and then see if you can figure out the name of the movie. Okay, I hope this was helpful and it didn't go for too long. I promise I will get better at these. Okay, bye.